is Ayush Alavadi and you're watching What Did You Miss on Bloomberg Quint Live. Let's get straight to the headlines. Indian equity benchmark rebounded from a 6-week low led by Bharti Airtel and Asian Paints. Cipla brushes aside regulatory concerns in the United States. Speaking to Bloomberg Quint, CEO Umang Vohra says he expects a quarter of the pharma major sales to come from the US over the next 3 to 5 years. In his first interview since taking charge of Infosys, Chairman Nilekani says the company's digital push will start showing immediate effects. Also says professionals and not founders can take Infosys to greater heights. Prime Minister Modi questions Rahul Gandhi's silence on the Ayodhya issue on the last day of campaigning for phase 1 of the Gujarat polls. Rahul questions Modi's silence on the troubles faced by farmers. And the UN Security Council will hold an emergency meeting to discuss Donald Trump's move to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. India says its stance on Palestine remains independent and consistent. It's bounce back day in Dalal Street. Benchmark indices rebounded from a 6-week low and end with gains over a percentage. Broader markets too posted handsome gains. Neeraj Shah is standing by to sum up the day's market action. Neeraj?
Well, you can call it a bounce back rally. You can call it a rally which was led by what happened to the Asian bourses as well. But across the board in rest of Asia as well as in India, the quantum of gains were between 1%–1.5%. So good bounce back day of trade. Some bit of short covering as well, you would say. So good day on that front as well. But mid caps, small caps participated. Volatility ebbed quite strongly as well in the session today. So those were the highlights for the trading day. Look at that. 1.4%, 1.3% for the mid caps and the small caps as well. Good going. The stars of the day, I would say GAIL, 8% higher, Bharti Airtel, Bharti Infratel, some really strong moves that came in for a bunch of these large cap names. You don't normally see the index move up so strongly without banks participating, but that's what's happened today. So these were the set of stocks which did really well for themselves. Maruti Suzuki, Bosch bringing up the auto end, and as I said, amongst the top 4 or 5 contributors, you didn't have banks. Maybe not ICICI Bank, but otherwise not so much. What else? At the broader end of the spectrum, KEC International, strong moves there. Rain Industries moving back to 103, 190 odd debt levels, and then certain pockets went up. So rice exporting companies, and we had Chamandal Sethia management on Bloomberg Quint as well, who spoke about how the times look very, very good. Exports are very strong. So LT Foods and Chamandal Sethia and a few others did very well. You also had the liquor companies doing rather well for themselves. So GM Breweries up 12%, Radicorp 4%. I mean, as usual, there will be a couple of stocks which would have not done too well. In today's session, the mantle went to Jubilant Foods as well as PI Industries. So these are a couple of names that are a case of sour grapes, but on very high volumes on the bank expiry day. We had a really good day of trade. Doubtful this can happen tomorrow as well, because the shorts, some bit of shorts would be out of the system. But let's wait and watch. At least the downtrend seems to have been broken for now.
Well, Neeraj, thank you so much for the wrap of the market action today. Well, Andrew Holland of Avendus Capital, however, remains cautious on PSU banks, especially after Urjit Patel announced that the recapitalization plan will focus on slim and trim lenders. In a conversation with Bloomberg Quint earlier today, listen in to a slice of that conversation.
You know, after that euphoria of the recapitalization, the RBI kind of yesterday said, you know, we're going to decide who gets the money, and it's going to be based on, you know, whether they think it can be utilized properly. So that kind of probably makes me feel that there's only 3 or 4 banks on the PSU side who's probably going to get recapitalized if they follow that through to the T. So, you know, that's not great news for the PSU banks again. But until we get the details of exactly what they're going to do, then we'll probably sit on the sidelines a little bit with PSU banks. But obviously, it's not good news for a lot of these smaller or inefficient banks in the PSU side. It's not, you know, it's not going to be you know, Christmas may not come for them so early this time around.
There's a Credit Suisse note today, Andrew, and they believe, and everybody is of course entitled to their opinion, but they believe that some of these highly valued NBFCs could now start underperforming, and maybe some of the well-managed PSUs, not the entire bucket, but maybe the large PSU, they have mentioned the largest PSU bank, naturally so, might actually be an outperformer. Would that be an exceptional mover, SBI, one? And would you believe that some of the expensive, richly valued NBFCs could underperform over the course of the next 6 to 9 or 12 odd months?
See, I think you're always going to get pockets or periods of time when the NBFCs will underperform as the the valuations kind of consolidate. But if I'm correct on what I've just said on the PSU banks, then it's going to be the private banks and the NBFCs which continue to take market share from the PSU banks, and that's really why you're going to see huge amounts of growth. And then obviously with areas like affordable housing and that whole housing market is going to be a good area for both the banks and NBFCs going forward.
Well, a late entrant into the US, Cipla wants to play catch-up in the world's largest pharmaceutical market. A lot is riding, though, on the drug makers' 3 big launches lined up over the next 3 to 4 months. Speaking of Darshan Mehta, the company's global CEO and managing director, Umang Vohra, says the aim is to get a quarter of Cipla's total sales from the US within the next 3 to 5 years.
We believe that the US should at least be 25 to 30% of the company, right, in 3 to 4 years.
25%?
Yeah, 25 to 30% is what our aspiration for the company is in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
And, the company is growing, as is the US, but that's where we want the US market to be.
What about margins? You've said that, at least for the near term, margins will be in and around this level. For this year, you've guided for it'll be sub 20%. But do we see the possibility over the next few years that, again, you might inch back to the 22 to 25% mark?
I believe that normal of 24 to 28 today, Darshan, for the rest of the industry, is possibly somewhere the 22 to 24 range.
Okay.
Right? Because post the US price erosion, etc., I think the industry is looking at a new margin normal. It cannot be the same margin normal that happened earlier. And so if it is 22 to 24, depending on the mix of how quickly the US scales up for us and what type of price compression we see in the US, I think Cipla will eventually get there, but we are in no hurry. I think if we are even at the 20 to 22 range, we're actually okay.
No, it's not being the best, Umang. It is basically, I understand what you say is there's a responsibility towards patient, but for a company, there's also a responsibility towards shareholders.
Correct.
Now, if you're saying that you moved from 15 to 18%, that's a good thing and you've achieved it. But still, it's subpar because I know that some of them have come down. So I'm just asking, if you're saying that 22 to 24% will be the new normal, you're still below that. So when will Cipla reach that level?
So as I said, we're looking at a 2-3 year window to get ourselves there.
And how do you intend to do it?
Well, I think it'll come out of our mix, our growth. It'll come out of complete control on costs, like we're doing to, even this year and the year before. So all of that will contribute to us getting there.
Well, Infosys wants to use disruption to its advantage. The company's chairman, Nilekani, wants to go big on artificial intelligence and Internet of Things. In his first interview after taking over as the chairman in August, Nilekani told Bloomberg that much of the new strategy has already been discussed with incumbent CEO Salil Parekh, and Nandan's own role now is to convince all the big clients that Parekh is the best man for the job. Ruling out an active involvement of the co-founders in the day-to-day running of the company, Nandan said it has always been a professionally run enterprise and there's no reason why that should change now. Well, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley took to Twitter today to allay fears around the pending financial resolution and deposit insurance bill. Jaitley said that the objective of the government was to protect all stakeholders, including depositors. The bill is aimed at minimizing the risk of failure for financial as well as non-financial institutions like banks, insurance companies and stock exchanges. However, the government has come under scrutiny from several quarters over the inclusion of some provisions in the bill that might hurt the prospects of small depositors. Now, the government today informed the Supreme Court that it's willing to extend the deadline for Aadhaar to be linked to essential services, including bank accounts, till March 31st. The government, however, is keen to extend the deadline only for those who don't have an Aadhaar card. The Apex Court will now hear the matter next week. Arpan Chaturvedi, who was in the courtroom when the Government Council made these comments, gets us the details in this report.
earlier the Supreme Court had indicated that the main challenge to the Aadhaar Act itself that will be heard in the last week of November, but then again the Apex Court has been hearing other matters in the Constitution bench. The Delhi versus Centre matter just concluded, and again there's one more case which is being heard right now, and therefore that main challenge to Aadhaar petition has not been being heard as of now. And what the petitioners now are saying that until the main matter or the main challenge to the Aadhaar scheme is decided, there should be a stay on the various linking deadlines, which is to bank accounts and other schemes as well, and that there should be a stay and that deadline should be extended. Now the government on their part say that they are willing to extend the deadline up to 31st March 2018 except for mobile numbers, for which the deadline will remain February. But the government also says that this extension will only be for those who do not have an Aadhaar card, and for those who have an Aadhaar card there will be no change in the deadline. And to counter that, the petitioners say that this extension, if granted, should be for everybody, which means including those who have an Aadhaar card. And on that point of contention, this was mentioned today in front of the Chief Justice, who said that he will set up a constitution bench next week sometime, which will hear on this limited point that whether there should be an extension, and if it is for who all, this extension will be granted until the court hears and decides on the main Aadhaar challenge itself.
Well, the extension of Aadhaar linkage with bank accounts might complicate the process for banks, says V.G. Khannan, the CEO of Indian Banks Association. He also told Bloomberg Quinn that the banks will find it hard to ascertain if an account holder has an Aadhaar or not. Listen in.
In fact, I think probably the intention is to make them also to go and get their Aadhaar card. And some of them may not have the Aadhaar card. For example, you have got the non-residents which have been exempted. So they may have been mentioning those cases. Extension for the local people would technically mean that that's an issue of getting a link. But yes, they need to get their Aadhaar card at the earliest. So I don't know how it will be monitored. It will going to be a big task on the bankers to get themselves convinced that a person doesn't have an Aadhaar card.
Well, campaigning for the first phase of Gujarat Assembly elections ends today. Prime Minister Modi will end his campaign with a rally in Surat. BJP President Amit Shah will lead the campaign from Saurashtra. A total of 89 seats out of 182 spanning the Saurashtra and South Gujarat regions go to polls on Saturday in phase 1 of the elections. Opinion polls indicate a win for BJP, but with a smaller margin than before. Meanwhile, former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh has said that Congress party has a vision for the transformation of Gujarat. Speaking at Rajkot on the last day of campaigning for phase 1 of the Gujarat elections, Singh promised to rule with both head and heart if the Congress comes to power in the state. He also accused the BJP governments of the past 2 decades for failing to improve the quality of education and healthcare.
BJP governments of Gujarat have let the quality of public education decline, and this has led to rampant privatization of education. The Congress government will change this. We will invest in the people of Gujarat by increasing the budget for healthcare and education. Congress party has a vision for the transformation of Gujarat. We promise that we will govern with both head and heart. The pressure of the protests in Rajkot and Surat and the way Congress took up the issue of GST that led to some recent changes, I still fail to understand how a 28% GST on auto parts will help the economy in the industrial hub of Saurashtra. GDP growth in the July-September quarter of 2017-18 has registered a growth rate of 6.3%. I am happy to see this, but it is too early to conclude that it represents a reversal of the declining trend observed in the previous 5 quarters. To equal the UPA's 10-year average growth, the economy will have to grow at 10.6% in the 5th year of Modi government. I would be happy if this were to happen, but frankly, I do not think it will.
Well, after posters in Gujarat urged Muslims in the state to support Ahmed Patel for the chief minister's post, the Congress MP today said that the campaign linking him for the CM's post was nothing but false propaganda. He also said that he never coveted the post in the first place. Listen in.
दुष्प्रचार है, अब ये भांप चुके हैं कि उनकी शिकस्त तय है और यहाँ पे कांग्रेस की सरकार बनने वाली है, तो अभी जो भी कुछ थोड़े से दिन रह गए हैं उसमें कलाबाजी कर रहे हैं कि कहीं पे कुछ पोलराइज हो जाए, उसी का एक हिस्सा है। न तो मैं कहीं चीफ मिनिस्टर का कैंडिडेट था, हूँ और रहूँगा।
Well, the Road Ministry has decided to review its toll operate transfer model. Now, the new road building scheme, which was launched by the government last year, requires developers to make an upfront payment in lieu of the toll that will be collected over the tenure of the contract. Road and Highways Minister Nitin Gadkari told Purva Chitnis of Bloomberg Quint that the nodal ministry is looking into concerns raised by road builders.
Already we receive a lot of suggestions on that. We are rectify the things. We are receiving the tenders and we will, as early as possible, we will finalize the tender.
And here's what one of the probable bidders for these TOT contracts, MEP Infra's MD, Jayant Maheskar, had to say about the hassles of finding funds to execute the project.
As far as TOT is concerned, TOT is a very new concept where the entire upfront or the monetizing of future receivables is done by the government. The first package is around 6,000 odd crores, which has to be bid in the month of January. The total outgo would be close to around 6,000 since there is an upfront payment which has to be made. MEP currently is talking to a couple of large, I would say, funds and international players for a potential JV. And we are hopeful that we should be able to achieve one of them and bid for this project. Of course, the first project will be more of a pilot or experimental project where companies would, I would say, do a lot of due diligence because you have to maintain the road, and the most important is the traffic growth scenario because these are all national highways where you have sustainable traffic which has already flowed, and there is a I would say 30 years is going to be, to my mind, is a large challenge in terms of the tenure of the project because Indian banks currently are supporting only between 20 to 25 years of funding. So 30 years funding availability or ability to raise that is going to be a one point which needs to be really looked into. The second is the cost of borrowing because these are large projects. Every single I would say 50 bips or 100 bips is going to make a very significant difference in terms of actual bidding. So I think time is the only remedy to see how it ventures out.
Well, in other news, China has said that an Indian drone intruded into its airspace recently and crashed in the Sikkim sector in the Chinese side of the border. China's foreign ministry spokesman Geng Shuang confirmed lodging a diplomatic protest against India for violation of Chinese sovereignty. This comes ahead of the Russia-India-China foreign ministers meeting, which is on December the 11th. Now, in a remarkable shift in foreign policy, US President Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. In an announcement last night, he said he will start the process of moving the US embassy there.
After more than 2 decades of waivers, we are no closer to a lasting peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. It would be folly to assume that repeating the exact same formula would now produce a different or better result. Therefore, I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Well, there's been appreciation and criticism of the move from across the world. While Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed the move, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said that the announcement was tantamount to a US withdrawal from the peace process. 8 Security Council nations have demanded an emergency meeting to discuss President Trump's decision. We caught up with Raj Bhalla, professor at the University of Kansas and senior advisor at the Dentons law firm, to understand the implications of this move.
Well, first, from India's perspective, India has long enjoyed excellent relations with both Israel and the Arab states across the Middle East. So one challenge now for the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister is to see what should they do. Should they follow suit with the Trump administration, or perhaps much more likely, should they join the chorus of all other countries, France, Germany, Turkey, China, Russia, the Saudis, Jordan, as well as Pope Francis. All of them have said that this is not a good move and reacted negatively. So from the Indian perspective, given the long-standing good political relations and healthy economic relations, including workers in the Gulf, this issue does matter. Then I think you put your finger on it perfectly, that this raises the question in minds across the world. Can the United States any longer be looked at as an honest broker? It's very interesting if we go back a little bit in the history. In 1947 and 1948 and 1949, the United Nations General Assembly actually passed resolutions declaring that Jerusalem ought to be considered a separate body, basically an international city, because it is the holy home to the three Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And the United States joined in two of those resolutions, saying, yes, it ought to be an international city. In the third one, they said, no, it's not going to be possible given the outcome of the 48-49 war. But since 1949 until perhaps today, the United States has consistently maintained that the final status of Jerusalem, including its boundaries, should be subject to international negotiation.
Well, Professor Pala, to withdraw from that situation disrupts the Middle Eastern peace process at a time when we've in fact seen festering violence across the Middle East and, several local wars. What do you make of the kind of implications this will have across the world? I know that several leaders have come out and said this might lead to an escalation in violence, and they've also accused the U.S. of quite literally withdrawing from the peace process.
Yes, and that even presumes there is a peace process. Many observers say the peace process basically ended, at least temporarily, in the 1990s, and that the U.S. has basically withdrawn from it and today openly sided with one side. But let me step back and let offer a perspective in which I hope sort of cooler heads might prevail, and that is to view this differently, whether you think of it symbolically or legally. If we look at it symbolically, then the potential for escalation and, God forbid, violence is there. But if we look at it legally, carefully, and we say that the U.S. has not actually drawn boundaries with across Jerusalem, and it is truly left open the possibility of final status talks. If we can try and focus on some of the subtleties, then it's possible that maybe cooler heads will prevail and it won't contribute to an escalation of violence. I would say, though, also, and this takes it back to the symbolic point, and part of the great concern is, in my own opinion, this move it does nothing to enhance America's national security, because it will be looked at symbolically on social media by extremist groups as a tool for recruitment. Why would the U.S. want to give a tool for recruitment, even if it's purely rhetorical and it's not correct legally or factually? Why would the U.S. want to give a tool for recruitment to extremist groups? That's a big question I think the administration has to answer.
Well, Turkish President Erdogan lashed out at U.S. President Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He said that the move will put the region in a ring of fire. He also accused Trump of trying to be an agitator and said that the decision completely disregarded the 1980 UN resolution on Jerusalem. Relations between Turkey and the U.S. are already strained over the Syrian conflict. Well, Bitcoin climbed as more than 7.9% on Thursday as it surged above $15,000. That's right, extending this month's advance to more than 40%. The price of the cryptocurrency touched a record according to Bloomberg pricing. Bitcoin got a boost from a successful test of the Lightning Network, which promises to provide a new way to pay with Bitcoin. The technology would move some transactions away from the blockchain by allowing buyers and sellers to transact privately and later broadcast their activity to the public network. The largest cryptocurrency by market value has soared from less than $1,000 at the start of the year, up more than 1,300%. The cryptocurrency is trading close to 15,150 currently. Well, with that, it's a wrap on the show. I hope we've helped catch up with all that you miss through the day. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint.